Welcome back to RGR Football, everybody. My name is Daniel Harms. You can find me on Twitter at InHarmsWay19, the lead film analyst there. And today I have a very special show for you guys. Matt Bowen of ESPN NFL writer and analyst is joining me today. I'm very excited about this. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing great. What's going on?
You know, this is the busy time. We all kind of got through it. The busier time was about 2 weeks ago when they were all like trying to final crunch to get our draft stuff done. But right now is the final week before the NFL draft. And what better person, in my opinion, to have to talk about the defensive side? You do everything, but I think that this is really your wheelhouse. But before we get into the draft, I want to talk to you a little bit about your coaching career, because we do keep in touch a little bit outside of the draft. And you coach a high school football team, and you just came off of winning a state title. That's right. Am I right about that?
Yeah, that's right.
That's cool, man. That's so awesome. Like, how rewarding is it to coach at the high school level with these kids and leading them into the college world?
It's been super beneficial for me personally, to be honest, Daniel, because I think when you're done as a player, you try to recreate that competition, right? And you can't really do that, not in the sport of football. And you want to be around like-minded people in terms of how they talk, how they think, how they act. And for me, that's always been in sports, and especially in football. So after I got done playing, I was 31 years old, and I started in the media. But originally, I went back to school when I got done playing. I went to got my master's at DePaul University here in Chicago. It was called Writing and Publishing because I thought there'd be a time when I would want to teach and coach at the high school level. So I got my graduate degree, but then, the media, I got into the media, and that started to take off a little bit. And I, went from spot to spot, Chicago Tribune, Bleacher Report, and then on to ESPN. But there was still something that was always missing, right? In terms of that competitiveness and being in that like-minded environment I was talking about. And I got into coaching here in the Chicago area, out in the suburbs in Elmhurst, Illinois, at IC Catholic High School. And I'll be going into my 9th season next year of coaching the defensive backs. And it's been something I've needed personally in my life, but also the benefits of working with kids, developing kids, seeing them grow, because we are a smaller program. We only have 360 kids total in the school. So we practice as one program. So you get to coach kids when they're freshmen all the way through their senior season, because we practice all together at the same time. So it has been one of the best decisions I've made in my life. And I have 4 boys. My 2 younger boys will go to IC as well. So I get to coach them in high school, which is also going to be very rewarding to me. But it's helped me too, Daniel. It's helped me in terms of writing, to be honest, about scheme and football in general, because you have to understand that pro football is behind schematically compared to college, and especially to high school. I think high school is usually first. And it's interesting because we all are smaller programs. So we go to the state playoffs. We go out west, Northwest Illinois, and play games, Western Illinois, out by, the Mississippi River. And you see so many different offenses. Here in Chicago, you're going to see a lot of spread. You're going to see a lot of trips to the field and advanced passing formations and concepts. You go out west and out by the river, you're going to see double wing. You're going to see wing T. You're going to see the bone. You have to play the veer. You have to play double dive. You have to play superpower. And it's funny because I remember, what game was it? I think it was this past season. So it was the Sunday night game. It was Dallas and Philly.
Okay.
And Jalen Hurts threw a touchdown to Dallas Goedert, and it was an RPO, like an RPO arrow screen, right? Where they're reading Micah Parsons, and it's really a run to throw option for Jalen Hurts. And Parsons doesn't read it right, and then they get the pass, walk-in touchdown. And you look at social media after the play, and people are talking about how advanced the scheme is. I've seen that for 9 years. Right? You see it at the high school level every Friday night, because the RPO game is so advanced at the high school level. Now, obviously, it's much different when you have NFL athletes doing it. We all understand.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah, but that has helped me in terms of coaching at the high school level and seeing the schemes, seeing how things advance, and applying it to what I write about now. It's really helped me learn that side of football, because you have to understand, when I played high school football, that was in the early to mid 90s. There was no spread formation. There didn't exist. I ran an offense that was 22 personnel, so it's 2 tight ends. We ran power, we ran the veer. We ran a power scheme where I would pitch the ball as quarterback. I would pitch the ball and become the lead blocker. Okay, so that's how football was, right? And then when I played in the Big Ten, obviously, it was still, 21 personnel. That's what we
Mhm.
were at Iowa. Some 12 personnel. We'd be in a little shotgun and some 2x2 sets and trip sets, but not like it is now. And we really didn't see empty or tempo or spread until Drew Brees came to Purdue. Okay, and those teams, that was different to everyone.
Yeah.
How to game plan and stop empty, and all the quick game, the bubble screens. That wasn't a part of Big Ten football when I first started. So the game has advanced so much. But I always say this, Daniel: no matter what you do in terms of scheme, there's only so much you can do. Right? You only
Mhm.
have 11 players. Okay, so no one created this up. No one recreates football. And I always find it interesting when you're looking at scheme stuff on social, and obviously Nick Saban deserves all the respect in the world for what he's done at Alabama. But when they show Nick Saban schemes, well, we were running that stuff with Greg Williams in 2003, in 2004,
Yeah.
in 2005. I mean that there you can make adjustments to the scheme based on the personnel you have, but the schemes really don't change. And my point of all this, Daniel, and having coached for 9 years now, it's how you teach it, right?
Mhm.
That's what's most important. Is how you teach it. You can have a big playbook, but if you can't teach it right and your players can't execute it, it doesn't really matter. And I always look back in my career. So obviously with Greg Williams in Washington, very advanced, right? Someone goes in motion, a lot of things are going to change. A lot of things are going to change in terms of what you're doing defensively. They shift, things are going to change. Whereas when I played for Lovie Smith, way back in St. Louis, it tells you how old I am. I was playing for the St. Louis Rams. Um, Lovie Smith's defense is a read and react system, right? A lot of zone, a lot of cover two. It's more about teaching the technique within the scheme than the schematics itself, because you're going to show people what you're doing.
Mhm.
They know what you're doing based on lined up and too high. Well, here we go. It's cover two again. But it depends on how you teach the scheme and how you execute. And obviously, the players you have. You look at when Lovey was here in Chicago with Urlacher, cover two was really cover three
Yeah.
because he can run the pipe, and you had three deep with a 6'5" linebacker. So, taking all that together, my point of all this, I'm rambling a little bit. I apologize, but
No, I
the
love it.
point of
It's
all
great.
this is that it's how you teach it, man. It really is how you teach it. And coaching at its core is about relationships. It's about the relationships you have with your players, with your assistants, with the head coach, with the coordinators. And that's how you have a successful team. We've been very successful at IC Catholic. One, because of the character of the kids we have in school. That's the number one thing. Accountability, ability to manage their time, the ability to play through adversity, the ability to be a multiple sport athlete, and challenge yourself to compete all year round. That's where it starts. That's where it starts. But it has been one of the most rewarding things I've done in my life.
That's awesome. Honestly, listening to you talk about it, you can tell how passionate you are
Mhm.
about teaching and coaching. That's one of the things, I wanted to get inside so everyone can hear how passionate you are about it. Because I'm, myself, I've been doing this now since 2018. So I've got 5 years, only
Mhm.
5 years trying to learn all this stuff. And the more you learn about it, the less you understand. And the more you
Mhm.
understand that there's way more that you never could have imagined. So when I think about how I can get better at this, it's all about the coaching aspect, trying to learn how a coach teaches, how they would teach this, how they would dissect this, play things like that,
Mhm.
offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. So I think that might be in my future at some point, because that whole part of it still is extremely interesting. And I would love to get into doing that and knowing how to teach it, because that, like you said, that's the best way to learn, is to be able to teach and things like that. So this whole incredible dissection you just went through. Honestly, you talked really about the next question. We're going to talk about the trickle down effect, which, Andy Reid has talked about it a lot as a guy who covers the Chiefs as well. He talks about it, and we've got interviews with Mike Kafka talking about how the NFL is 2 to 3 years away from college, and college is like 2 to 3 years away from the high school. That's how it is.
Mhm.
Innovation. That's so cool to see that go all the way up and through college and into the NFL, because high school's got to find ways to do this stuff too. They're always trying to find unique and different ways to score. So I always like how defenses change, but like you said, they stay the same. We see cover
I do.
two, cover three kind of go in and out of popularity between
Sure.
NFL defensive coordinators. And right,
Mhm.
this past couple of years, it's been the too high, trying to
Yep.
take away the deep shots with Patrick Mahomes and things like that.
That's what
So
it is.
it's
Exactly
really
right. And
cool.
you bring up a great point there. Is everything comes back, right?
Mhm.
Okay, cover three. Obviously, cover three. Everyone tags it as a high school defense, right? Well, cover three, if you just line up on a chalkboard and you have three deep with four underneath and you stand there, Well, NFL quarterbacks are going to light that up.
Yeah.
They're going to light it up. But look what Seattle did, in their Super Bowl year. One was the personnel. Okay, so they matched outside. They weren't playing off. They had corners that were physical at the line of scrimmage, that had length, that could drive on in breakers and still make plays in the football. They had the best free safety in the game at the time, in Earl Thomas. They had a second level that had speed, and they were intimidating in their physicality in terms of their play style. And they had guys that could rush the quarterback. But now what you're seeing with coverage 3, you're seeing more 3-match principles, right? Where you're matching and carrying seams. When you're gluing up to guys underneath, it's not just a chalkboard defense anymore. But what we've seen is that if you do that against Patrick Mahomes, against Josh Allen, against Aaron Rodgers, they can still find the seams, right? So what the NFL has become now, in my opinion, Daniel, is the ability to create explosive plays and the ability to take them away. That's what the game is right now. And look, that's a very simple way to say it, okay? But if I'm game planning against Patrick Mahomes, regardless of who's on the outside, because I know Patrick's going to make them better, and you always have to account for Kelsey, I can't give up the deep verticals. I can't give up the deep over routes to Kelsey. I have to play too high so I can cut those deep over routes with my safeties. And you're seeing that more and more. Now, what that does, obviously, as we all know, that lightens your run from, right? It does. But how patient can you be? If I'm coaching against Andy Reid, how patient can you be?
Yeah.
I'm going to let you run the football a little bit. How patient can you be before you make a mistake and you call a play where I can have the safety sitting there in the alley ready to take it away? And that's kind of the game right now. And that goes – I remember a conversation we had with Lovey, one of his first meetings as defense coordinator in St. Louis, talking about how we're going to make the offense go 12 plays. And what can happen within 12 plays? Think about how good you have to be offensively to go 12 plays in a row of not having negative plays. The minute you have a negative play, things change. Now you're behind the sticks. Now it's 1st and 20. He's got a holding call. All right, now everything changes. What you have to do schematically from an offense perspective. And Lovey would always say, let's make them impatient. Let's make them throw us one, right? And let's make them work it down the field. I remember a game, I don't have the exact number, so I'm just speculating here, but I remember seeing it written somewhere when Rodgers was young in his career against the Bears, and I think Lovey played like 42 straight snaps of cover 2. And he said, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
We're going to do this. They won the football game too, so this is what we're going to do. And that has come back a little bit. It really has. And there's different ways to do it. You see cover a lot of quarters, right?
Yes.
Quarters or cover 4. Especially when teams go trips to the field, you're seeing that boundary corner now locked in man coverage. I call it 4 lock. I'm sure there's a cool name for it, but you lock the boundary X receiver, right? And then you can push your safety to the trip side and take number 3 vertical. So there are ways to adapt or adjust zone coverages versus NFL competition because you have to. You can't just line up in straight zone all the time unless you have elite personnel like those Bears teams under Lovey and, the Legion of Boom in Seattle. They had elite personnel and they could simplify things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but I do think too high is where it's at right now. I know we're going to talk about it in a minute, but that's what this safety class is too, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a lot of split field safeties who can play top down in the football. And people say, well, it's not a great safety class. Okay, maybe it's not great in terms of elite measurables and elite talent, but in terms of what the NFL is today, well, those guys are going to play. They're going to play a lot of football in the league because that's where the league is at right now.
I love that you segued right into it. We'll get right into the safety class because I think that you make a great point. And when you watch, I've watched a good number of these guys now over the past 2 weeks, and that's exactly what it is. You see a lot of these guys, they'll show maybe one high, but at the end of the day, they're playing split field cover. Not a lot of these guys are playing sideline to sideline as a true free safety. And in today's NFL, like you said, this is really make the offense blink. We're going to play too high. We're going to rotate some guys out there, but at the end of the day, you're not throwing the ball deep on us. We will make you go the length of the field one way or the other. And for this safety class, I know you said it's kind of the general consensus is this it's a down year, but get in a little bit more detail about why this class is a little bit, I think, like you said, underrated because of the way that defenses are playing right now.
Well, I think the first player to start with, if we're gonna call him a safety, is Brian Branch from Alabama. Right? Okay, let's say that, Dan. Let's call him a safety. Okay. So Brian Branch from Alabama in your sub personnel, when you have 5 and 6 defensive backs in the field, I think I call it the star. Some people call him an adjuster. Some people call it a slot corner. I mean, that's what it is. But that's what he did a lot of at Alabama, and he can match and carry in the slot. He can play curl the hook. He can play man coverage from an off-man position and play against speed in the slot. And look, this goes back to this is a whole nother discussion to have, Daniel. I know what he ran in the 40. He ran what, 4.58?
Yeah, something
I know
like
he's
that.
190 pounds. Let's look at the tape. Okay, can we go to the tape? Because
Yeah, right.
look, I've always said the safety position different than corner. Look, corner and wide receiver, Daniel, they're stopwatch times. You got to have time. That's just how the game is played. They want those times. I've never said that about safety because of a couple things. One is your natural instincts. Okay, that makes you play. If you're a 4.58 guy, now you're playing at 4.48. And I think that's really where you talk about Branch where his game speed is. I think that's probably what it is. High 4.4s. Okay, it doesn't show up in the stopwatch. I understand that. But he's a highly instinctual defensive back who played in a system at Alabama that has pro defensive concepts. Okay, we're just talking about Saban's stuff that it's all over social. That's for a reason because it's very advanced, you have to have high football intelligence to play in that defense. And Branch has it. You can tell it just by watching the tape. His feel for the game, his ability to get a jump on the ball, his ability to read quarterbacks, his ability to read route stems and undercut routes. Okay, that translates to the NFL. And he has ball production. That's one thing I look for. And really in everything, but especially defensive backs, you have to have some impact plays in the tape, right?
Yeah.
You have to have some impact plays. I understand alignment and assignment. That's your cover charge to get on the field. You got to know that stuff. I understand being in the proper stance. I understand being able to run the alley and tackle. That's very important to me. But two things really that I got to see are the ability to make plays in the ball and to have a sense of urgency. The one model I always use is if you want to know what urgency looks like in the secondary, watch Buda Baker play the safety position for the Cardinals.
Yes.
Okay?
All over the place.
He is a rocket to the football, right? And look, if I'm a coach and you make a mistake, but you're going 100 miles an hour, look, we can fix everything else. We can teach the technique.
Yep.
Right? The one thing I can't teach is your ability to play with that sense of urgency and your ability to put yourself in position to make plays in the football, because that, to me, either you're a playmaker or you're not. And if you're not a playmaker, that's okay. But we're not going to talk about you as a potential first-round pick. That's just how the draft works. That's how football works. But Branch is one of those guys where I use the term multi-dimensional traits. Okay. And I think Branch has the ability that if he had to rotate to the post, he could do it. I think he can play in the quarter. I think he can play in the deep half. And you brought up a good point about safety in general. When I played, it was strong safety and free safety. That stuff's gone. All right. You're a safety because there's so much late rotation. Look at Spags in Kansas City.
Yeah.
What they do with their rotation. You don't know. You'll have three safeties in the field and the Chiefs dime personnel. You don't know where they're going. You don't. They can all spin to the half. They can spin to the post. They can come down and pressure. They can play as a robber in the middle of the field. So you have to have some sense of those multi-dimensional traits. But you can't just say, look, I'm a strong safety. I play in the box. I got away with that, okay, in the early 2000s because that's how football was, right? You put me in the post, you're asking for problems. You're probably asking to lose your job as a coach. So you wanted to hide me near the line of scrimmage. I'm fine with that. I'm fine saying that. But you can't really do that anymore. You can't. Now, in sub personnel, there's different things you can do. Like Adrian Phillips from New England, you know, how they play him in sub personnel, where he is really a hybrid defender, in my opinion, where he can play on the edges, he can match and carry, plays his own defender, blitz, tackle in the run game. There are things you can do in sub, but I think you need to be that multiple player in the secondary, especially at safety, and that's what Brian Branch is to me. And I'm interested to see where he goes.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if someone gets him in the late first. I would not be surprised because of the program he played at, the high-level games he played at, the college production he had in the SEC, and how he fits today's NFL.
I like that. I think that because you talked specifically about ball production, and if there's one thing I think we kind of over talk about is, these guys are supposed to play the run too, but you're going to get paid as a safety in a corner to cover. Okay. You're going to be paid to cover. If you can get in space, you can be one-on-one with tight ends and running backs as a safety. Guess what? You're going to not only get paid, you're going to make yourself a name. And I think that's one of the things about Brian Branch. I wrote down he's a too-high / slot cornerback, which is exactly what he is. But he can do everything. He can come down on the line. He can match up against tight ends. He can play it as a robber or that rat in the hole, as they call it, depending on how you want to run him as a safety. And it's the speed off of the tape again. You don't care about the 4.58. Kyle Hamilton last year coming out Now he's with the Baltimore Ravens. He ran a 4.6, I think, something like that. It doesn't necessarily matter because the instincts and then the acceleration that Brian Branch plays with downhill is that what really what matters. You don't have to play single high safety for these guys anymore. That's just not, that's not really what it is. It's about how you read, react, and get downhill quickly, because especially if you're splitting the defense in the field into two halves. Okay, I don't have to get all the way over there. All I need to do is take this half of the field, accelerate. If I can get to point A from point A in the middle of the field or on the right to point B, which is half of the field, that's what matters. That acceleration point is what I really care about. And especially his read and react, eyes on the quarterback almost at all times. He has a natural feel for where a defender is and where he understands where he's supposed to be and how he passes off. So I like Brian Branch as a player a lot. I do think he probably sneaks into the back half of the first because of exactly what that is, because he's going to be valuable to an NFL defense. And when you're able to come away with the football, when you're able to get hands on balls, passes, deflection, those can turn into interceptions, not just getting them yourself, but getting them for your teammates. There's a lot of players that are going to probably go on day two, early day three. Who is probably your favorite, I would say, day two value pick? Someone that's going to go on day two that you imagine is going to go on day two, that's going to be someone that plays at safety for a long time in the NFL.
Okay. We both watched him at the Senior Bowl. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think I might have been sitting with you when we were talking about him. Look,
I
really like Sidney Brown from Illinois. And look, I don't know if he's day two. Maybe he's early day three.
Yeah.
Okay. Because look, and this is something that needs to be discussed too. Safety, I think it's a very important position because it's the middle of your defense. But in terms of draft value, I don't think it's a premium position. Okay. When you're talking about draft value, it's on defense, it's your pass rushers, whether defensive tackle, defensive end, or your edge players, and your corners, right?
Yep.
And so sometimes you see the safety start to slide a little bit, but Sidney Brown to me is a tone setter. Okay. And again, this would be a conversation to have too someday. The difference between a coaching evaluation and a scouting evaluation, right?
Okay.
But from a straight coaching evaluation, the best way I can say it is I want Sidney Brown in my defensive back room.
Yep.
Because of his professional approach to the game, how he plays the game. We talked about sense of urgency before. He has it, the physicality he plays with. And I think he's got better coverage traits than given credit for. Okay. And we're talking about coverage traits. I'm not talking about manning up versus slot. And that's another thing here. There's not many safeties that can man up versus the slot. You can cover down versus the slot. We're talking about Kansas City. When you spin late and you're sending pressure, yeah, you can play at 7 yards, drive downhill on the ball. If it's a quick throw to the outside or a quick 100, you can do that. But if you're talking about a safety matching up versus Cooper Kupp, that's where I'm throwing the ball every time, right?
Yeah.
That's where the ball is going, okay? So that's why you have, but again, that's why you have your slot corner and your dime corner. But Sidney Brown, to me, and you saw it at the Senior Bowl practice, we're sitting there in the stands. He plays at a different speed, okay? And I don't even know what he ran the 40 in. I'm not going to look at it right now.
Yeah.
Because, again, I don't care because you see it on tape. He was around the ball consistently at U of I this past year. And I've always said this, Daniel, defensive backs that are around the ball, that's for a reason. Okay. Yep. Interceptions do not happen by accident, even overthrows. Because in an overthrow, you're in the right alignment and assignment formation. You are driving downhill in football. You are reading the quarterback. You're in a position to make that play. Even a tip pass, you're in a position to make that play. Because guys that consistently make plays are there for a reason. That's Sidney Brown to me. He will tackle in the run game. We understand that. And I think a lot of times I look at this, Daniel, is, okay, how can they be utilized in a pro defense, right? Mm-hmm. Well, to me, Sidney Brown can be utilized exactly like Hufanga is in San Francisco. Okay. And I think their styles are very similar, right?
Yeah.
And I think Hufanga was a day 3 pick, if I'm not, I think that's
I believe so, yeah.
5th rounder. So, because look what Hufanga does in San Francisco's defense. Top down the football, right? Like you're talking about that short area burst or short area acceleration from the deep half or from the curl when you're driving downhill on the ball. You're active, you're around the football. You're used as an early down blitzer versus run heavy teams to scrape off the edge. And at the end of the day, what I would describe Hufanga as and Sidney Brown as are disruptive players. Mm-hmm. And I want disruptive players in my defense. Look, we're talking about earlier how you have to take away explosive plays. You're not going to shut people down anymore. You're not. The rules have changed too much. You're not going to shut people down. There's not going to be, you're not going to win games 7-0 anymore in this league. So you have to have players that create impacts in critical game situations on defense. And for me, at the safety position, you need someone that's going to make plays in the football or make negative plays behind the line of scrimmage based on the scheme you play in. And I think Sidney Brown can be one of those guys. And again, I don't know if he's a third rounder, maybe a fourth, maybe he goes to the fifth round. We don't know that yet. But that's someone I want. And also another conversation off this is you need guys that cover kicks too. Yeah. And that's usually what you get out of your safeties and your secondary players. Someone that can make plays for you on special teams. And Sidney Brown did that at Illinois as well.
Yeah, I like what you talked a little bit about earlier about these guys that you go 100%, you can coach some of the things you mess up. I think Hufanga is exactly that. And I think that Sidney Brown can be to that as well. You see them miss tackles sometimes because they do take those really aggressive angles. And that's fine. Honestly, if you're going to rush to the outside shoulder of that ball carrier, force him back inside, miss tackle, fine. You got some help coming in underneath. I'm okay with all that stuff. And Sidney Brown, you will see, he will get downhill. He'll attack that outside shoulder and tackle, and then he'll just maybe miss it, but everyone will help clean it up. And, I tweeted out a little bit a few days ago, 2 plays of Sidney Brown. One where he's coming up underneath in the hole and eyes on the quarterback, nearly gets an interception coming off of just a little curl route. And that's what you're talking about. These guys are just so instinctual. They understand the field position. And then there was another play right after where he comes in. He sets the edge underneath the tackle. He gets underneath and puts his shoulder in his chest, and he sets an edge. That's the kind of understanding how to use your body in the run game, in the passing game, with your eyes and all that stuff that I love about Sidney Brown. So I would personally love to see him go on day 2. I think he's going to be an extremely impactful player. And I think that you were talking about, Hufanga, that might bring his draft stock up because a team could say, all right, we see what they're doing in San Francisco, a team like the Jets, for example, who have some ties back with San Francisco, who can take someone like that and say, okay, we see a value for this in the 3rd round, which is great for these safety players. I think you take him out, you put him in there, and that's a really, really good spot for him. I think Christopher Smith out of Georgia is another one of these other instinctual players that can play more of a too high end robber. And he's going to come downhill. He's going to come hit support in the run game, and eyes on the quarterback are another one of those players. So I think he's probably going to be a day 3 guy. Someone coming out of Georgia. I don't think he tested very well either, and his size is a little concerning, I would imagine, for some teams. But again, play effort, play style, instincts all get drafted. So those are a couple guys that I really do like. This is going to be I think Merriweather out of Iowa is another guy. People talk about Moss, Riley Moss being a safety, but we're gonna probably.
I think he's a corner. That's
I think he's a corner.
I think he's a corner. I think Riley. And I got to know Riley a little bit over the past season. Obviously, you see the Iowa helmet behind me. Yeah. So if we start going down that path, it's going to be very biased conversation. Just to tell you right now, because
honestly, it's not a biased conversation.
I think Riley can play corners, no question about it. He can open and run. He's got the speed. He's got the ball skills. He's got great zone vision, but he can match and carry a man coverage too. So I just had to get that in there.
No, you're fine. I agree with you. Watching him at the Senior Bowl, I've watched the tape. I'm a Michigan fan, so I watch a lot of Michigan football. I get to see Iowa every single year, basically. I watch a lot of Iowa football. My dad's an Iowa football fan, so I watched them growing up. And they also produce guys that are always around the football. Always.
They do.
Iowa just does it every single year. Every single year.
So think about this. Phil Parker was my defensive back coach. He's still there. Okay, so Phil Parker started in 1999. I was part of Kirk's first team. Originally played for Hayden Fry at Iowa. And Phil Parker has been there since 1999. Look at how many players he has put in the pros that have long careers. And I think a long career in the NFL, you're talking 7, 8, 9 years. That's a long time in that league. How many players he's put in there that are consistently productive, consistently available, and play a certain brand of football that's built on toughness and technique. And that's going to carry you. And we haven't gotten to that because, look, all of these young players we're talking about right now are going to have to develop in this league and understand speed. I'll tell you a quick story. When I was drafted, obviously, by the St. Louis Rams, back then you had real training camp, okay? What that means is you went away for 4 weeks, and we stayed at Western Illinois University in the dorms there, and you had 2 days. You had practice twice a day, every day. That's what you did.
Yep.
And when I got down there, I was coming from the Big Ten, like we talked about, where the only real thing you saw in terms of tempo and speed was playing against Breeze and Purdue. And I get down there, and my first day of practice is against the greatest show on turf. And Daniel, I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah.
That amount of speed with Isaac, Torrey Holt, Akeem, Ricky Prohl, Marshall out of the backfield. seeing Orlando Pace move. I've never seen a tackle move like that, right?
Yep.
And then you have Kurt throwing the football. So that was, I always get asked, what was your, welcome to the NFL moment? It was the first day of practice because the speed was so great. And that's what I'm talking about with these young players when they get into the league. We'll see how much faster the game is and where they have to adjust their technique.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you want to see some level of technique. There's no question you have to see some level of technique. But we all know the draft is based off of traits, right? And the traits you have, because the technique is coachable, right?
Mm-hmm.
The traits are not. I've always said that, especially, in high school recruiting. I do it all the time with the players we have, is height, weight, and speed matters. It does. Your frame matters. Your upside matters. Your ceiling matters in terms of your body growth potential. And it's really about body type, body movement, and the speed you have. Because from a coaching perspective, you think you can teach the rest, right? I can teach you to have a smoother pedal. I can teach you to put you in a position where you'll have a greater transition speed coming out of your pedal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can't teach the length, right?
No.
Can't teach the top end speed when you're beating a fade. I can't teach that.
Mm-hmm.
You have it or you don't. But for me, that I'm telling you, man, I always think back of that first day of practice like this is ridiculous. Just how fast it was and how fast everything moved throughout practice. And
Mm-hmm.
pro practices are, in terms of the tempo and the energy, are fast. And there's not a lot of standing around. You go from drill to drill, segment to segment. And obviously, again, the game was different back then because we had more live contact where you would hit twice a day. And I thought that was good. That's a discussion for another day. But I thought that really prepared you for the regular season. Now, the downside of it is you come into the season already a little beat up.
Mm-hmm.
Because back then too, Daniel, we played in the preseason games. Even when I was a starter, I only started for a couple of years in the league, but you started every preseason game too. So that's 4 games of hitting in the preseason plus 2 days of hitting. Then you go into the season. And I do think that did contribute to more injuries throughout the season. But
I think that's what we've seen
for football and physically ready. I think it was beneficial, but I get it. I mean, I would have loved to not have 2 days. Who said they like 2 days, whether it's high school, college, the pros? Daniel, they're lying to you.
They're probably lying to you. Exactly.
No one likes that stuff, man.
So we just kind of got off on the cornerback. So let's go ahead and talk about some corners here.
Okay.
I like this corner class. I know the last couple of years we've seen some pretty aggressively talented cornerback classes. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's probably going to be 4 or 5 corners that go in the first round this year. Personally, do you think that this group matches up with what we've seen over the past couple of years? I know Sauce Gardner really headlined the first round last year. You're not going to find a Sauce in this draft specifically, mm-hmm. but I think talent-wise in the first round, do you think that matches up what we've seen over the past couple of years at the corner position?
I do. I think this is a very solid class, and you're going to see. I agree with you. A lot of players drafted in the first round because mm-hmm. there's always a run on corners, right? There's always one. Now this class might have 2. Potentially, you could have 2 in the top 10 with Gonzalez and Witherspoon, depending on how you rank them. Okay, but those are 2 top end corners. I think Witherspoon really became a top tier prospect when he ran in his pro day.
Yeah,
he ran in the low 4.4s. Like we said, safety and corner are different. The corner, if I'm a scout, I want the time speed. I want to know what it is. And if you run the 4.4s, you're good. You're good. Now, DJ Turner, something different. You run in the 4.2s, and now your draft stock's really going to go up because it has to, because that is something, again, an uncoachable trait with top end speed like that. But there's going to be a run on corners outside of the first 2 we're predicting right now to be very high because there's a need for it. There's a need for it. And like we talked about, Daniel, with so much split safety coverage, right? 3rd and 2 to 6, you got to play man. Low red zone. You're inside the 10-yard line. You sit in cover 2. That's tough, man. You play cover 3 in the red zone. If you play cover 3 against a team I'm coaching, I'm gonna light you up in the red zone. I'm gonna get this team every time. Okay. So in critical game situations, you have to have the ability to play man coverage, the ability to challenge from a defensive perspective. You have to disrupt the release. You have to challenge wide receivers to win in 3rd and 2 to 6, and really in 3rd and 7 to 10. I always look at the numbers every year, the top coverage rates. And even the zone-heavy teams on 3rd down, that man coverage rate starts to climb, right? It has to. Because if you sit in zone, against Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes, you just run a stick route and it's going to be a first down.
Yep.
Every time. Every time. You have to match him and challenge him. So this cornerback class, you have guys that can challenge at the line of scrimmage. You have guys like Gonzalez that are extremely fluid, who can open and run and change directions and play through multiple breaking routes. You have a corner like Witherspoon from Illinois that plays almost like a safety.
Yeah.
In terms of his urgency, his urgency to get to the football, both in the run game and in coverage. He makes a lot of plays, I think, late in the down in coverage because he plays so hard. He's such a high energy player. But again, man coverage traits. Forbes from Mississippi State. I really like him.
Oh man,
because he makes
He's
plays.
so fun.
Look, he has an extremely narrow and lean frame. He's 166 pounds. Okay,
that's what he measured in. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's extremely lean, but he's got the coverage traits, Daniel. He can make play. He's a natural playmaker. He sees things fast. Again, something you really can't teach. He sees it fast and get a jump on the football to make plays in the football. So Forbes is one of those guys. I mentioned Turner. Turner might have the best technique.
Mhm.
He really might have the best
I'm with
technique. He might be someone I think that can play inside. Okay, because he can mirror. And what I mean by mirror is, what's the best way to describe it? It'd be like if you're trying to take a charge in basketball and you're moving, right? You're trying to stay in front of the guy. And he can mirror off the line of scrimmage. Excellent footwork. He's got the lateral juice. And of course, when you run the 4-2s, like we just said, you're going to get drafted higher. But that's someone who can play in the slot as well. And I think that, again, that's such a valuable position to have. If you look at a team like Buffalo, their base defense is being sub. To have 5 defensive backs, that's what they are. They don't really have a base defense in terms of the traditional chalkboard defense, what is a 4-3-3-4. They are in sub. You got to have 5 defensive backs. Banks from Maryland.
Yep.
Banks from Maryland is going to go in the first round. Wouldn't be surprised if he's a top 20 pick. Okay, because he has transition speed, ball skills he can cover. Joey Porter Jr. That is an ideal fit if you're going to play a lot of press coverage.
Yeah.
Because he is extremely physical at the line of scrimmage, and he makes up for his lack of lateral speed with that length, right?
Yes.
Now he gets that reach to make a play. When you run in-breaking routes versus a press corner who has that length, think of Richard Sherman. How many plays he made in breakers during his career because at the end of the route, he has the length to undercut and make a play on the football. But it's I think it's an extremely strong class. And the corners get drafted. That's the thing. They get drafted. So if you're a young player coming out and you're not mentioned in the top tier, you're still going to get drafted. You got to have you can never have, best way I always say, you can never have too many defensive backs. Because now you're playing an extra game. Guys get banged up. Guys get an ankle. Guys get a hamstring. You need depth there. You need to play 5 and 6 defensive backs. Look, if you're in New England, I call it dollar. They play 7 defensive backs in the field. Okay. And like we talked about with the safety position, those defensive backs fill out your special teams units. So you can never have too many defensive backs. So this is a good class if you're an NFL team that either lacks depth at corner on day 2 and day 3 of the draft, or are in a position to draft a young player who you think can be a starter for a long time in your system. I look at a team like Minnesota drafted in the 20s and the defense they're now going to play under Brian Flores. You need man coverage corners.
Yep. You
need man coverage corners in Minnesota right now. You're not playing quarters anymore. You're not. You're going to play a lot of single high, whether man coverage or cover 3. And really in cover 3, when you get a vertical release, it's man coverage anyways. You're on top of the route.
Yeah.
So that's a team right there that you're looking at. Someone like a Turner, someone like Banks if he's still there, Forbes if he's still there, where you could see, I think that run on corners could start right there.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. And honestly, last year I had Minnesota, I mocked Trent McDuffie to them at 12. I was like, this is a perfect fit for what they need. They need corners. Instead, they trade down with the Lions, and then they end up taking the corner out of Clemson, whose name's escaping me right now. But yeah, so you brought up DJ Turner. I think he's going to play outside inside in the NFL in terms of like a team that has their base where he can play on the outside, and then in sub he'll just condense into the slot where you see L'Jarius Sneed right now for the Chiefs, for example. He plays on the outside, but he's a bit bigger than DJ is. But that's the style that I think that we're going to see a little bit more because it does get him into his best position, because Snead can play on the outside and he's got that physical nature. And I think this past year he accepted that challenge. He actually went to this coaching staff and said, I want the number one receiver. I want Mike Williams. I want the guys that are bigger, because that's what he wanted to do. So I like that mentality. I think DJ Turner can do both of those things. You know, I talked about Forbes. We have now a little bit of information that he's trying to gain weight. He's in the 170s now. He wants to be 180 by the time the season rolls around. That's a goal for him. We'll see how his change of direction is impacted, if at all, by that, because some of these guys have that frame where it won't matter. He can put on that weight and it won't be an issue. I want to get your opinion on someone who I can't find any film on, Tyreek Stevenson out of Miami, who transferred this past year to get more playing time on the outside. What do you think about Tyreek? Because again, I've seen a lot of hype about him, but I can't speak to him because I don't have any film on him to actually watch. So I want to get your opinion.
We watched him at the Senior Bowl. I mean, we started. Remember, we watched him. I thought he had a really good week at the Senior Bowl. I thought he was competitive down there. I think he did good in coverage drills. I think you saw the physical traits or the physical tools he has. Now, I've talked to people who said that when he brought up Riley Moss, that Stevenson could potentially be a safety in the NFL. Yeah, because of his size, because of his forward ability, right? I still like him as a corner, and this is why. When you look at 3-by-1 sets in the NFL, like we were talking about earlier with four-lock and playing that boundary position, the boundary X receiver, you know, the Mike Williams you just mentioned, the Mike Evans, the Michael Pittman, you know, you have to have someone that can match them in terms of physicality and strength in press coverage. And I think Stevenson can be that player for you. I do.
Yeah. Okay.
I think he's a press corner. I think at times from an off-man position that his transition speed isn't elite in terms of breaking the football. But when you have him matched up in one-on-one, playing as a boundary corner, because it is so important in today's NFL, I think he can do that for teams. Now, do some teams see him like a C.J. Gardner-Johnson, where they can play him in the slot, they can play him at safety. He has those coverage traits to be an interchangeable player. Maybe, but again, goes back to the physical tools he has, what he showed at the Senior Bowl, what he showed on tape. He's a draftable prospect. I don't know where that is, but again, someone you need for depth, someone you can develop, and again, someone who fits in today's NFL schemes.
All right. I love that. And we saw quite a bit of day 2, early day 3 corners at the Senior Bowl. These guys were impressive. Darius Rush had an excellent week. I think, again, Moss was one of the best corners out there, and I do think he's going to be a corner in the NFL. I know people, like I said, talk about safety. He's going to do that. I want to switch over to just kind of day 3 guys, because there's one guy that I have my eyes on a long time, and I've watched him. It's because I watched Jordan Addison's tape earlier in the draft cycle. They played Oregon State, and I just loved what Rajon Wright did to Jordan Addison, because he won his fair share, but I think for the majority of the time when I watched Rajon Wright play, he was all over Jordan Addison. He wasn't afraid of getting beaten deep. And when you have that as a corner, because he has that recovery speed we talk about, you can get stacked as a corner, but if you have the ball tracking, the ball skills, and the recovery speed, which he has all 3 of those things, it doesn't matter as much. You just can't get lazy with it. I think that's one of the areas that he does tend to get. He does struggle with at times, where he's like, I trust my recovery speed, but you can get beaten across your face a little bit too much at times. But he's physical. He comes underneath guys. He has really, like I said, he has really good ball skills downfield, eyes, locating, all that kind of stuff. And he's a big physical guy who can play press. I think he's also man and zone as well. So he's one of the day 3 guys that I really like
him too. I've watched his tape, and I agree with everything you're saying right now.
That physique.
Again, a draftable prospect and someone that fits in today's NFL because one of the man coverage traits, how he plays man coverage, his willingness to challenge.
Yes,
is what you're saying in the matchup with Addison. I'll bring up another player, and I think you commented on Twitter. He's a very interesting player to me. Is Clark Phillips out of Utah?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, because Clark Phillips makes plays in the football. He has that sense of urgency. He will tackle in the run game. And what I mean will tackle, he's a willing tackler in the run game. That's what you want. Okay, you don't have to be Steve Atwater. Okay, you do not have to be Steve Atwater corner, but you have to be a willing tackler. Someone will play downhill with that sense of urgency. Now, the question about him is the limitations in terms of height, weight, and speed.
Yeah,
and especially the length. Okay, so he doesn't have those elite measurables. He ran a 4.51. This one thing I'll say real quick. We talk about his safety. Corners is a stopwatch position, but 4.51 is still fast. Okay,
yes,
I don't know when did that become slow? Because I don't know. Is that slow? Go find someone in your neighborhood and runs a 4.5 and go race it on the street and see how fast it really is, because they're gonna beat you. Okay, 4.5 is moving. Okay, I think we've been, because training is so different. The surface they run on in India is so different. You understand, when we ran, it was at the RCA Dome on old AstroTurf on the sideline. You couldn't wear cleats, couldn't wear
Mhm.
track spikes, you couldn't wear racing flats. You said run sneakers, and the gear we wore was the worst you've ever seen. This is like 1980s movie, okay? Like the heavyweight T-shirt, the heavyweight shorts. We are trying to tie up our shirts; they wouldn't let us do it. Um, and the training has changed so much to where the nutrition, the functional movement training they do in the weight room, the functional movement training they do in terms of their stance and start preparing for the 40-yard dash, these times have exploded. Okay, where now 4.4 is, yeah, it's okay. It's now it's 4.3.
Yeah.
Okay, you don't 4.3. If you again go race someone on the street who runs a 4.3 and see how fast they are. But training is so different. It's so different. And college football in general is so different, Daniel, in terms of what you're provided as a scholarship athlete.
Mhm.
Okay, you get the more food than you can imagine in a Big Ten program right now, more supplements than you can imagine. When I was at Iowa, we got one meal, okay, one scholarship meal a day. That was it. So our diet basically was that one meal,
Mhm.
tuna fish and bush light. Okay, that was kind of our diet. That was our diet at the University of Iowa in the 90s. All right, so again, training has changed, and you're
Mhm.
seeing in today's athlete, much more explosive athlete than in the 90s and early 2000s, much more highly trained athlete. And that's why these times are better. But we still have to understand that 4.5 is fast enough. And when I watch Clark Phillips on tape, I look for guys, again, I talk about making plays on the ball, especially Power 5 competition. If you're a Power 5 defensive back and you're playing in one of the top conferences and making plays on the ball at a consistent basis, well, to me, that's going to translate to the NFL. Again, it might not happen right away. It doesn't mean you're going to get 7 picks as a rookie. But Clark Phillips has something that I watched on tape, again, from a coaching perspective, that I want. And I think he can play in the slot in the NFL. I think he's got enough lateral bursts on tape. Again, the testing numbers don't say that, but on tape, where he can play in the slot, especially in a more zone heavy defense where he can match and carry, drop as a curl defender, driving the football. He sees it fast and he finishes plays.
And that goes back to what you were talking about earlier. He sees things before they happen. So if you don't test as a great short area player,
Mm.
especially for a corner and a safety, you process. This is kind of like how a quarterback sees defenses pre and post snap. He processes. Corners have to process too. They have to process what they see in front of them, especially if they're playing in zone. I have this curl here coming. Like I have the boundary going behind me. I have to know where I'm supposed to be. He processes things quickly, and that's why I believe he's going to be a very good slot corner in the NFL, because some team's going to stick him there and be like, just cover this area. Okay,
Mhm.
just cover it. And when the ball is around it, he's going to find a way to collapse on it. And I love that about him. He's just understands what he's supposed to do so well and how he sees the field. And that's such an underrated part of playing corner. I think that people forget. It's become such an athletic testing thing that mentally, being sharp mentally as a corner is, in today's NFL, more important than it's ever been. It's more important than it's ever been because of all the different things you're seeing. So I think he's an extremely high level functioning mental player as well. So
Mhm.
I love him as a player on day 3 as well.